arts of the time, and he could conduct, you know, the king's armies at the time. And he has a wife, had a child, and I think he started being bored. You know, he was bored to death with that life that has nothing. Everything was only pleasure and comfort. And he asked permission to visit the city, which was outside, you know, this compound of the kingdom. And they insisted. He was already older. He was 26 years old. And he insisted with his father. He needed to know if he wanted to be king, he needed to go and know his reign. And so the king cleaned up the town as much as he could, you know, again trying to stop him from becoming himself. And did all the cleaning possible, sent all the poor people, the lepers, the very old age people, you know, all the poverty that existed in the world that had existed until our times, because we are the ones that have changed the world in the last 150 years in terms of the majority of people being well, not rich, but well, in human levels that we now consider, you know, human levels. And so he gave permission for him to go to town. And he went with his chariot and the charioteer, the guy that was driving the charioteer. It's a very interesting position. He's a very interesting man because he was driving the car, you know, of the king, the future king, and he was the one to answer the questions. And I think there's something very special about him. And so they went travel, and, you know, sooner or later appeared an old woman on the road, very, very old, all wrinkled and poor, very poor. And he asked, what is this? What happened to her? He has never really seen anybody that old. His mother had died when he was born, and so her sister has married the king and has taken care of him. And so the charioteer started answering, well, she's an old person. And he said, that has happened to everybody. He said, yes. He said, it's going to happen to me. I said, yes, that is going to happen to you. It happens to everybody. And so he went, one situation after the other, he met a leper. And they asked the question, the charioteer explained to him. He said, it's going to happen to me. He said, it could happen. Disease happened to a lot of people, and it will happen to everybody. So he started to understand how people disappeared around him in his court, that he would never see them again, that the father was told that they were gone away, they were traveling or something happened. You know, there was always an explanation why those people were not around. The people were sick, the people that got too old, the people that, you know, that they didn't want, that could awaken his concerns. For another side, I really think that nothing better could have helped the prince to wake up than really not seeing anything and then seeing and really have a shock. Because we have seen everything. We are sleeping. We don't see it anymore. It doesn't shock us what we see. If we think in our lives today, you know, we live with the suffering and pain and disease and the end of the body every day, and we even can, even seeing all this, we still can keep in our minds most of the time, forget that we're going to die in a few years. Forget that this body is just a ship or a spaceship, today we can call it spaceships, you know, that we are using to do this journey in this planet. And it's a very limited, you know, span of life. But we can manage by many ways that our culture function in a way that help us to live in delusion all the time. That we don't see, that we ignore the reality of life. So when the Buddha saw all those things, and he really learned what the reality of life was, that has been hidden from him all his life, he decided, he knew that his father wasn't going to allow him to go search for something. he decided that he had to know why this happened. Why there is so much suffering in the world. Why we have a limited life. Why, where we came, where we're going. And how can we overcome that? Those were the questions that he had for himself. And he knew his father was not going to answer or help him in anything. So he planned that he was going to leave his reign and his family and his child and everybody, and asked, we make an agreement with the charioteer that would drive him as far as possible during the night. And on the way out of the city, he met this group of yogis. There were a kind of very severe yogis that exist still today in India, that are very severe to the body. They're self-torture, self-mortification, they don't eat. And he joined them because they were his first teachers. He really went with them for 6 years. And he tried everything they taught him, everything they knew, all the techniques of yoga that were self-mortifying, that were self-torturing. Even in Catholicism, we have some saints that have done that. Trying self-denial in all kinds of ways. And he tried everything. And there are some statues of the Buddha that show this completely mortified Buddha with the bones showing on the skin. The Dalai Lama himself has one of those statues in his room, and he says he likes to keep that statue there to remind himself how difficult it is to achieve enlightenment. That also is not that easy. And so the Buddha tried that for 6 years, and when he was really about dying, that his body couldn't take anymore, he knew if he continued to do those things, that he was going to die. He was in his 30s, early 30s. So he decided to abandon that all. He sat under a tree and rested, went to the river and took a bath, drank the water and sat there to rest, knowing that he hasn't achieved yet. He hasn't answers to his questions. And then later on, we're going to make a relation with the process, the analysis that Jung does to the same crucifixion of Jesus. And at that point in Jesus' path, Jesus goes to the mountain to meditate, and then he's tempted by Satan that offer him all the riches, right? So the same happened to Buddha. They call Mara. Maras came to him and offered him women, all the kinds of things that dissipate our bodies, that are the attachments that we have in the world. And Mara really is a word for the mind. Mara it can be translated as demon or demons, the head demon, or our minds. Okay? Mara is the projection of we'll say like Satan, the projection of I would say when we make emotions more, how do you say that, Sherry, more from in human images. Like anthropomorphic projections. We project emotions in the form of different types of people, or different types of beings, elemental beings of things, demons, for example. Jung explained that very well. And so Mara came to him and tempted him the whole night, and he decided, I'm going to sit here until I find enlightenment. But that's the moment when he separated himself from all the techniques of self-negation, of self-mortification. He took, at that moment that he was resting under the tree, a beautiful girl came and offered him a beautiful bowl of rice, and he took it. And he accepted that. The other yogis that were there, they were, accused him of abandoning the path, of giving up, and not continue the path. And he said, that's wrong. There's something wrong with this path. It didn't work. It's not going to work. It has to be something else. But I'm going to sit here and watch my mind until I find the answer. And he was sitting there under the tree for 2 or 3 days. I don't remember exactly. It's also depending on the story that you read. Those are legends. But those are legends like myths that have a clear process. Myths are not untruths, like a lot of people think. Myths are built inside of our minds through dreams, through folkloric stories. They somehow are built in a way that really tell very important process of the human psyche and the human development. So is also the legends about Buddha. And so he went through all the temptations of that night, just like Christ went through the temptations with Satan. He went with Mara. And he just stayed there, unmoved by the apparitions, by all the things that came to him. He just kept calmly observing and watching until they all disappeared. And when they all disappeared, the same way they came, like illusions and delusions, that is what they are, but also they have energy because they come from within our own minds. Those are what Jung called the archetypes of our minds. This is what forms our psyche. Those kind of projections and images and elementals and kinds of beings. Then he achieved the insight stage. After he was able to see all these afflictive emotions, which are all these temptations, that came to his mind. Oh, if I do that, if I go with a woman, I'll rest my mind. We're not going to have those visions anymore. If I drink something, I would relieve my mind. So that he went through all this just watching his mind. And then as they dissipated, everything dissipated, and he stayed in the state of perfect relaxation, and the mind becomes so clear. There is a light in the mind of that stage. It's called enlightenment. When you reach that stage, all the unconscious has passed through your eyes, and you reach the state of clarity on the mind, which is called enlightenment. And then you understand what the reality is, what the real nature of reality is. And that's not about our mind only, it's about all the world that surrounds us. And what he understood was that the nature of reality is something the physics discovered today. It's called emptiness. Physics discovered that this table is not really a table. Actually, it is a table, but it's not really solid, right? Everybody knows about that in physics, okay? So every particle of this table is separated from each other. This is not concrete, it's not solid. Unfortunately, some parts of the Greek philosophy, that we adopt during the Renaissance, said that, really separate matter as solid matter, and the atom was the last individual piece of matter, indivisible piece of matter. And physics today has discovered how, it's infinitely divisible, including to the point that you can see in a moment, another moment appears on another side. It's not even, it can be influenced by our mind as we interact with it. This all has to do with Buddhism and self-transformation. Because Buddha discovered that, and then he gave it the name to it. We call it today, we call it quantum physics. Buddha called it emptiness. He said, the real nature of reality is that there is like a womb, a matrix of emptiness. And the particles of life exist there, unorganized or organized. They raise according to conditions. And they race together in some ways that you have a form. It forms something. But actually, those forms, what in Buddhism we say that everything is emptiness, can be very misunderstood. It was in the 19th century, in the first contact that the 19th century, scholars had with Buddhism. They called it nothingness. It was used to be translated as nothingness instead of emptiness. And that took a very negative, significance in terms of the way we saw Buddhism. We saw Buddhism in the 19th century as very negative to life, because there was something called renunciation, and because we believed that everything was nothingness, and then people will lose the will to live. And it happened to a lot of people. It is one of the dangers of meditation and Buddhism, is when you not only know intellectually, understand the nature of reality, because today we also know physics a little bit, but when you experience the nature of reality with your senses, you might have a danger of thinking about nothingness. So if nothing matters, so why care? And I know some people have killed themselves because of that, could not resist. That's why Buddhism is step by step. Tibetan Buddhism is extremely careful, because it has a tremendous impact in our psychology. Buddhism is psychology, it's about psychology. It's also above all, about the nature of reality, but we are part of the nature of reality. So the most important thing that Buddha was able to express himself is that there is suffering. There is enormous suffering, because we are forms. That he said we don't exist really, because we're not solid. And because we have not been originated by ourselves, we didn't self-originate ourselves. Right? We are created by causes and conditions. That's how, the same way that a table is created by a cause and condition. I have to have the wood or whatever material that is used here to create the table. I have to have a person, I have to have a design, and I have to have tools to create. Those are causes and conditions. A body is the same. It has to have causes and conditions for a body to exist, right? But it's transitory, like everything that is alive or semi-alive. Everything that's created by matter is transitory. Why? Why? Can somebody tell me? Why is everything transitory that we know? All life, everything is transitory. Think.
Because of energy?
A little more.
Because nothing is permanent?
Yes, because we are just an aggregate of a lot of things. We are construct. Even literature and some philosophers today are talking about constructing, constructing thoughts, constructing theories. This is, I think, influence of Buddhism in our civilization lately in the universities. So we used to take theories, as solid things, the dogmas. you know. And everything is a construct in some way or another of good conditions. If you go to the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., you can watch the beginning of life. See, when the first conditions on Earth became favorable to bacteria, have any of you have been there and watched that process? It's a beautiful exhibit that it is in the museum in Washington. The beginning of life. You know, when the first conditions in the planet were created, humidity, certain kind of humidity, and then those bacteria start producing oxygen. Others were, you know, very small process of some things creating a condition that will generate other conditions, until life became possible. And then we have the amoeba that was self-sufficient and did everything until it surrendered to unite to another amoeba and another one, and then the first body start to be, you know, a first process of organization, and then the first system of intelligence is started to emerge from those constructs that start emerging. You know, that's who we are. That's our body is, and that's why it's so like everybody else that we created or that we find around ourselves. All nature is a construct of some kind. A construct that means causes or conditions that were allowed that form to emerge. Right? So that's what it is. So Buddha concluded that because everything is a construct, and everything has a beginning and an end, everything degenerates, it starts, every form emerges, but has sort of a kind of a limited life, and some blooming, something beautiful happens, and then it decays and disappears. And he said our suffering is totally psychological, because when we become conscious of an I, you know, we lose the awareness that we are part of a whole. And when we lose that awareness of being part of a whole, that we are all in this together, like ecology today, discover that everything is interdependent and interrelated, right? So those are two main discoveries of science today that almost use the same language that the Buddha used. The Buddha used emptiness for whatever it is that contains all that makes form possible, particles. And in the end, you know, if we examine this table, although the form is still there, all the particles can be seen as separated particles fluctuating in an empty space. And so ecology discovered the same. You know, that all life in this planet is interconnected and interdependent. And whatever happens in any part of the planet affects the life and the conditions of life in another part of the planet. This is very new. This is 30-something years old only. But the Buddha, by going inside, we went outside. The West took the path of examination outside. Nothing wrong with that. You know, because right now what we're doing, East and West is meeting. You know, in this book that I really recommend you guys to read and to think about, don't go fast, don't read fast. It's called Open Secrets, A Guide to Tibetan Buddhism by 4 Western Spiritual Seekers. This is a book of the 70s. And it's still very, very... the author is called Walter Truett Anderson. I'll give you a piece. Could you give her a piece of paper? I think she wants to write. There are pencils here. And please, everybody, later sign the sheet, okay? He gives a wonderful introduction, and then we're going to go through the whole book. He did a job for us, which was wonderful in the 70s. which is to introduce why the West at this time is so open to bring the Eastern thought into the West. And what is it that we're opening ourselves to in Buddhism, and the three different baskets of Buddhism? In Buddhism, we call the three different stages of Buddhism, baskets, three yanas, also vehicles. So he says that Kipling, a very famous English author that wrote wonderful books while he lived in India, he says he was also a philosopher, that he thought that the divide between East and West was so deep in his time, which was the early 19th century. Kipling said, East is East and West is West. There's no mixing here. It's like oil and vinegar. And he's saying in this book that in 1970s already, East is West and West is East. Because if we look around, we can see how much the East that has gone only inside has not developed their, path through life by researching and experimenting and developing engineering and using all the material that is the world to make life better. Actually, they use people, which was a horrible way. We all did. All civilizations use people to enrich a small number of people that then could have a good life, that could have enlightened lives, that could have lives of development. They develop themselves, they study, they have, but they have to have like 9%, 70% or even more of their populations working for them to have their lives. That's what they were good at. In the West, we did that until last century. Last century, we started to think, as we made enormous technological discoveries, we started thinking in a different way, that maybe machines and technology can do for us instead of exploiting people so much. And it slowly in this century, appears slowly in this century, but actually is very fast if we only look at this century, how fast we have developed. But if we look 2,000 years ago, actually was a slow process that we did that also. We mostly exploited people instead of doing the developments that we fortunately did in about 100 years only, which is wonderful. So now they are looking for what we have discovered, and they're going to need it to free their people also from slavery. Communism did not work, not because communism as an ideology is wrong, but because the way the people used that ideology for their own benefit. The people that use the ideology to make the changes of the exploitation of capitalism in their countries exploited their people as much and kept them in captivity as much as it was in the past, and as much as wild capitalism did until 100 years ago. And so I think we should have a break right now for about 10 minutes. Bathroom, water, don't have tea, and then we'll come back until 9, okay? If you haven't signed here, please. You have a question?
So, certainly a lot has been covered. But most recently, we got into perhaps economic, political systems. And I'm curious, we have economists who are like the oracle cast of our society, and prior to economists, we had moral philosophers, where instead of emphasis being placed on the currency, the emphasis was placed on the people, who, I don't know, I mean, it could have been just as good or bad prior. Those, again, are another kind of mindset that perhaps Buddhism, I don't know what its tenets or takes on good and evil. I'm not a fan myself, but, you know, we all see, and we can point fingers.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we're pointing fingers at ourselves more so, I don't know. Let me see, where am I going here?
What is the question?
The question is, as we move from an emphasis of people providing the capital for fulfilling needs and wants, and as that transitions more so from relying on people to make provision for that, to relying on robots like our iPhones, or tractors, or, you know, pull any sort of technology from any period. I guess my curiosity lays in wondering, what does that do? Does that simply empower us, or does that mean that we lose something in the process that is fundamental to what brings about character in humans and in societies?
I think it's an excellent question. You should take a very good think about that.
Water.
Excellent question. We'll talk a little bit about it, because I wanted, you know, to talk at least about the three baskets and the difference between the three traditions. Beginning of talking about that today. What your question is inside what I was exposed in terms of how the East is taking our influence, and then I was going to talk about how we are taking their influence, you know, since we already made that development in terms of technology and knowledge and changing relations with humans with humans. We are already on the path to that. And they are beginning with the technology and will have to come to the relations of human rights in their countries. And then we'll see how this, you know, this syncretism that both, we're coming actually to a meeting of the two sides of the brain, you know, influencing each other. So we'll talk about that. Just really, it's good, take a break.
I have a question. I didn't quite understand this question.
Neither did I, Nobody understands me, I promise.
When after my divorce, when I was trying to find myself and I didn't like who I become, because like you said, you mirror that person you're with, and through your ideas of, you know, like, oh, to death do you part, so you accept it and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So the Buddhism helped me like go through my egos to help find me, and then my life was just going in a cycle, not prospering, growing. So then I kept asking God, I know I have a purpose and I'm not serving it, like, you know, what am I missing, whatever. And what I got was, is you need to move. And then it felt like out of the state, like, okay, give me some time to adjust to that vibration. Then I got, get rid of everything. And then that was like, wow, that really tested your ego because you hold so much clutter. But what I realized, being a massage therapist energetic, was, oh, it's the energy of my marriage. Oh, it's the energy of this, that. So I totally got that. And it was a wonderful gift, because then I found more of me. The one thing that I have is, I was very content with nothing. Like right now I have 2 bowls, 2 plates. But there's a part of, I guess, I don't know if it's Christianity, which says if God created everything, both poor and rich, why choose poor when you can have rich, but from your heart you can keep giving to the poor? Like I wouldn't need a mansion, but a house. But why? And obviously not a huge house, but some people, I guess, like, are they just basically too extreme? It's where you just need to find that balance within yourself and what you feel is, this is plenty for me. And if a person it's a mansion, then so be it. Don't judge them. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. It is above all, it's not about not having things, it's about the way you relate to things.
No attachment.
It's about
no ego.
attachment, yes, how you use what you have
Okay.
and how you relate to it.
Right.
You know, that's what you need to watch.
Okay.